The words, when they came, were not shouted. They were delivered with the casual, dismissive air of someone swatting away a fly. "You're not needed anymore, Mom." He said it, my son Tyler, the boy I had raised in this very house, the man whose every success I had celebrated as my own. He said it while his wife Nancy was measuring the wall in my bedroom, the bedroom I had shared with his father for 40 years, for a new headboard, not for me, not even for them. For their dog, they were giving my room, my sanctuary of memories and grief, to their spoiled, oversized golden retriever. They thought I was a ghost already, a faded photograph they could move from room to room until they found a suitable spot in the attic. They didn't realize that even ghosts can learn to haunt. They thought my silence was surrender. They were about to learn it was the quiet loading of a cannon. And in the end, I wouldn't just take back my room. I would take back the entire world they had stolen from me, leaving them with nothing but the echo of their own greed. The beginning of their invasion was, of course, disguised as an act of love. After my husband Frank passed away, the big house in Cincinnati felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. The silence was a physical presence, so heavy it made my shoulders ache. I was lonely, a deep cellular loneliness that felt like a terminal illness. Tyler and Nancy, my son and his sharp-edged wife, were living in a cramped apartment downtown, perpetually squeezed by rent and their own ambition. They called often, their conversations a litany of complaints about their landlord, their neighbors, their lack of space. My heart, still soft and foolish with a mother's instinct, saw a solution that would fix everything. I would have company. They would have a home. "Why don't you two move in with me?" I suggested one Sunday, my voice thick with a hope that now tastes like poison. "There's so much space here. You could save money, get on your feet. It would be a family again." Nancy's eyes, a cool, calculating blue, lit up with a speed that should have warned me. "Oh, Margaret," she cooed, her voice a perfect imitation of affection. "We couldn't possibly. It's too much to ask." Tyler, my son, my boy, played his part with devastating skill. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "Mom, that's so generous. But we wouldn't want to be a burden." I waved their protests away, desperate to fill the echoing silence of my life. "Don't be silly," I said, my heart swelling with a misguided sense of purpose. "This house is too big for one old woman. It needs life. It needs you." And so they moved in, bringing with them boxes of their things, and a Trojan horse filled with promises. "We'll take such good care of you," Tyler had sworn, kissing my forehead. "You've done so much for us. It's our turn." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first few weeks were a carefully staged performance of a happy, blended family. I cooked the meals I thought they loved, my hands finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of the kitchen. I showed Nancy where I kept the good towels. I listened to Tyler's stories about his work. I was so grateful for the noise, for the illusion of a full life, that I didn't see the foundation of my own being, quietly being chipped away, piece by painful piece. I thought I was rebuilding a home. I was, in fact, just clearing the stage for my own eviction. The first casualty of their occupation was my garden. For 40 years, my patch of peonies and climbing roses had been my pride and joy, a living tapestry of my life with Frank. He had built the trellis himself, and every spring its explosion of color was a testament to our enduring love. I came outside one Saturday morning to the whine of a power saw. Tyler was dismantling the trellis, the tangled vines of my roses lying in a brutal heap on the lawn. "Morning, Margaret," he called out, wiping sweat from his brow with a cheerful grin. "Making way for a new fire pit area. Nancy found this amazing design online. It's going to be great for having people over." I stared at the carnage, at the butchered stems of the roses Frank had planted for me, and I felt a physical pain in my chest. "But, my roses," I whispered, the words feeling foolish and small. Nancy appeared with 2 glasses of iced tea, handing one to her husband. "Oh, Mom, don't be so dramatic," she said with a light, dismissive laugh. "They were old, and honestly, a bit of a mess. This will be a much better use of the space. It adds value to the property." Adds value to my property. But already the language was shifting. They spoke of the house as a shared asset, an investment to be managed, not a home filled with a lifetime of my memories. Soon their campaign of modernization moved indoors. The comfortable, worn armchair where Frank used to sit, the one that still held the faint scent of his pipe tobacco, was hauled away and replaced by a cold leather cube that was impossible to relax in. My collection of family photographs on the mantel, Tyler's baby pictures, our wedding portrait, a faded photo of my own parents, were methodically taken down. "We're just decluttering," Nancy explained, replacing them with a single large abstract painting that looked like a blue smudge. "It creates a more sophisticated focal point. Every change was a quiet act of violence, an erasure." The injustice of it all began to simmer inside me, a low, constant heat. They were not just sharing my home. They were conquering it, terraforming my world to suit their own tastes, and I was expected to watch with a grateful smile. The food, the comforting, familiar food of my life, became another front in their war of attrition. My Sunday meatloaf, a recipe passed down from my mother, was suddenly deemed too processed. My habit of making a pot of grits for breakfast was met with lectures on carbohydrates and glycemic indexes. The kitchen, once my sanctuary, became Nancy's laboratory for kale smoothies and quinoa bowls, the scent of my home life replaced by the alien smell of their clean eating. I was being edged out of my own life, one redesigned room, one discarded memory, one uneaten meal at a time. I retreated into myself, my world shrinking until it was mostly confined to my bedroom. I told myself I was being accommodating. I told myself this was the compromise necessary for a peaceful home. But there was no peace. There was only the quiet, suffocating tension of being tolerated in a place where I was supposed to belong. I was becoming a tenant in the museum of my own past, and the new curators were ruthlessly efficient. The assault on my home and my history was swiftly followed by a meticulously planned campaign to control my finances. It was executed with such surgical precision, under the guise of such deep concern, that I was disarmed before I even knew a battle was being fought. They cornered me one evening at the new sterile dining table they had bought with my money. I would find out later, and spread my own bills out like evidence in a trial. "Mom," Tyler began, his face a perfect mask of filial duty. "We were just looking at all this, and it seems like so much for you to handle on your own. We're worried you might miss a payment or get overwhelmed." Nancy, the master of the soft sell, placed a cool hand on my arm. "We just want to make things easier for you, Margaret. What if we helped you streamline everything? We could open a joint account for the household. All the bills, all the expenses could be paid from one place. Your pension could go right in. You wouldn't have to think about a thing." A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. My finances were the last piece of my life that was truly mine. Frank had been a meticulous planner, a man who believed in security, and he had left me with a comfortable nest egg, a testament to a lifetime of shared work and thrift. To cede control of that felt like the final surrender. "I'm doing just fine, Tyler," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've been paying my own bills my entire life, and you're amazing for it, Mom," he said, his tone as smooth and placating as a sedative. "This isn't about your ability. It's about letting us, your family, take on some of the burden. We want to take care of you." They were so good at it, twisting my independence into a problem they needed to solve. They framed their power grab as an act of love. To refuse would be to seem ungrateful, to admit a distrust that would shatter the fragile illusion of our happy home. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind clouded by grief and a desperate desire for peace, I agreed. The trip to the bank was a blur. Tyler did all the talking, charming the young bank teller with a story about setting up a family estate account to make things easier for his wonderful mother. I signed the forms where he pointed, my signature feeling like a forgery of my own name. The moment I did, the vault of my life was thrown open to them. For the first month, they maintained the pretense. The bills were paid, but then the bank statements, which they tried to intercept before I could see them, began to tell a different story. There were charges at high-end restaurants I had never heard of. There were withdrawals from ATMs in Chicago from a weekend getaway they had never mentioned to me. There was a charge for a down payment on a sleek new SUV that replaced my reliable paid-off sedan. "It's safer for you, Mom," Tyler had explained, dangling the new keys. When I finally found a statement they had forgotten to hide and confronted Tyler about a series of charges from an online designer clothing store, his response was chillingly casual. "Oh, Nancy needed a few things for work events," he said. "It's a family expense. We all have to look presentable. My money, my savings, my security. It was now their family pot, a slush fund for their whims, their luxuries, their lives. I was not a partner in this family. I was its involuntary, silent financier. The injustice of it was a physical weight, a constant pressure in my chest. I had given them my home, and in return they were systematically gutting my future, all while smiling and telling me it was for my own good. With my home redecorated to their tastes, and my finances under their control, Nancy embarked on the next phase of her campaign, my complete and total isolation. She seemed to view my friends, my connections to the outside world, as a threat to her absolute authority within the house. My weekly bridge game with my best friend Monica and 2 other women from the neighborhood was the first casualty. It was my one weekly escape, a few hours of laughter and companionship that I treasured. "Mom," Nancy announced one Tuesday, her tone final and unarguable, "Tyler and I are going to start hosting a weekly couples dinner on Wednesdays. We'll need the dining room, so you'll have to find another night for your card game." I was stunned. "But Nancy, we've played on Wednesdays for 15 years, I protested. "Your friends can be flexible," she replied with a shrug. "This is important for Tyler's career." It wasn't, of course. It was a power play, and I knew it. But I was so tired of fighting. I made the call to Monica, my voice thick with a shame I couldn't explain, and canceled. The couple's dinner happened once and never again, but the damage was done. My bridge game, my small circle of joy, was disbanded. Monica, my dearest friend, was not so easily deterred. She knew something was wrong. She would call, trying to make plans, but Nancy always had an excuse at the ready. I would listen from the other room as Nancy's voice, a symphony of false concern, painted a picture of my decline. "Oh, Monica, I'm so sorry, but Margaret is just not up to it today. She's been so frail. She's having one of her confused spells again. The doctor says she needs absolute quiet. She's napping. She naps most of the day now." They were lies, each one a brick in the wall they were building around me. They were isolating me and simultaneously creating a narrative that would discredit me if I ever tried to speak out. Who would believe the frail, confused old woman over her loving, attentive children? It was diabolically clever. The world outside my front door began to feel like a distant country. I was no longer allowed to drive, my car having been sold from under me. My dependence on them was absolute. They were my gatekeepers, my wardens. The loneliness was no longer a dull ache. It was a sharp, stabbing pain. It was the excruciating loneliness of being erased while still breathing. My days became a monotonous cycle of silence and servitude. I would tidy up their messes, wash their dishes, and fold their clothes, not out of love, but out of a desperate need to feel useful, to somehow justify my existence in the space I was occupying. They rarely spoke to me directly. They would talk over me, around me, about me, as if I were deaf or simple-minded. "Did you remember to give her the new vitamins?" Tyler would ask Nancy, as I sat at the same table. "The ones for cognitive support?" Their cruelty was casual, baked into the very fabric of our daily lives. They saw me as a problem to be managed, a task on their to-do list. I was no longer Margaret, their mother. I was a set of needs to be met, a presence to be tolerated. The injustice of it all was a slow poison, seeping into my soul. I had given them everything I had, and in return they had taken everything I was. They had reduced me to a shadow in my own home, a silent ghost haunting the hallways of a life that was no longer mine. The core of my identity, the very heart of my home, was my bedroom. It was the room I had shared with Frank for 4 decades, the room where I had nursed my grief, the room that held the last vestiges of my life with him. It was my sanctuary. And then, they came for it. The conversation was staged with their usual flair for manipulative theater. They sat me down in the living room, their faces arranged into expressions of deep, sincere concern. "Mom," Tyler began, his voice soft and persuasive, "Nancy and I have been thinking. She's going to be working from home more, and she really needs a dedicated office space, somewhere quiet where she can concentrate." I knew instantly where this was going. A cold dread washed over me. "Your bedroom is the largest," Nancy chimed in, her voice gentle. "It has the best light. It would be the perfect space for her to be productive." "What about my room?" I asked, my voice small. "We were thinking you'd be so much cozier in the guest room," Tyler said, as if this were a wonderful surprise. "It's smaller, easier to keep warm, and we'd be right across the hall if you needed anything." It was a lie, a transparent, insulting lie. The guest room was a small, dark space at the back of the house that had always been used for storage. It was drafty, and had a single small window that looked out onto the neighbor's brick wall. They weren't moving me for my comfort, they were deposing me, they were taking my throne. "No," I said, the word barely a whisper but firm. "That is my room. It was your father's room." Nancy's face tightened, the mask of compassion slipped. "Margaret, we're not asking," she said, her voice turning sharp. "This is what's best for the household. We all have to make compromises." That was when Tyler delivered the blow, the words that would echo in my heart for the rest of my days. He sighed, a long theatrical sigh of a man burdened by an unreasonable parent. "Mom, stop acting like the queen. It's our house now." He stood up, his posture dismissive, final. "We'll help you move your things this weekend." The fight went out of me. The casual cruelty of his words, the finality of his tone, it was a death sentence for the life I knew. I had been demoted, displaced, dispossessed. I was no longer the matriarch. I was a tenant being relocated at the landlord's convenience. That weekend, they packed my life into cardboard boxes, my wedding photos, Frank's books, the quilt my grandmother had made, all of it unceremoniously dumped into boxes and moved into the cold, cramped guest room. I watched them, a silent, hollowed-out observer, as they transformed my bedroom into Nancy's sleek, minimalist office. They painted the walls a sterile gray and brought in a new desk and chair. My room, the heart of my home, was gone, and then he said it. A few weeks later, after I had settled into my new, diminished existence, Tyler came to me with another household decision. "Mom," he said, not even looking at me, "we've been talking, and Nancy really thinks we should move you into the den downstairs. It would give you more privacy." Before I could even process this new demotion, he delivered the final crushing blow. "And besides," he added with a shrug, "we decided we're giving your old room to the dog." I stared at him, unable to comprehend the words. "The dog?" I whispered. "Yeah, Brutus," he said, referring to their enormous pampered golden retriever. "He needs his own space. He's got so many toys, and a big bed. The master bedroom is perfect for him. You're not needed in there anymore. You're not needed anymore." He had finally said it, the unspoken truth that had underpinned their every action for the past year. I was not needed. My presence, my history, my very being, was an inconvenience. A dog's comfort was more important than my dignity. A dog was being given the room my husband had died in, while I was being shuffled around like a piece of unwanted furniture. That was the moment the old Margaret died. The loving mother, the grieving widow, the accommodating woman who always sought peace, she vanished. And in her place, something else was born, something cold, something quiet, and something absolutely unshakably resolute. The humiliation of being replaced by a dog was not a breaking point, it was a detonation. It incinerated the last vestiges of love and loyalty I had felt for my son, leaving behind a stark and desolate landscape of pure, cold clarity. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as a problem to be managed, and now a problem that had been solved. They had put me in my place, a small dark room in the corner of the house, while their dog luxuriated in the sunlit master suite. I became a ghost in my own home, but I was a ghost with a purpose. I started observing them, not as a mother, but as an anthropologist studying a strange and cruel tribe. I watched as they bought a custom-made orthopedic bed for Brutus, the dog, and placed it in the center of my old bedroom. I watched as they filled the room with expensive toys, a self-filling water bowl, and even a small television that they would leave on for him when they were out. They would speak to the dog in a cooing, loving tone they hadn't used with me in over a year. "Who's a good boy?" Nancy would murmur, stroking his head. "Does Brutus love his new kingdom?" It was a grotesque, surreal performance of affection, a daily reminder of my own worthlessness in their eyes. But their arrogance was their undoing, because they saw me as defeated, as a senile old woman relegated to the sidelines. They grew careless. They left bank statements on the kitchen counter. They had loud, indiscreet phone calls about their finances. And I, the invisible woman, listened and learned. I learned that they were living far beyond their means. I learned that Tyler's successful new job was a commission-only gig, and that he was struggling. I learned that the new SUV and Nancy's designer wardrobe were all financed on credit cards that they were paying off with my pension money. They were building a house of cards on a foundation of my life savings. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was the one who was going to pull the bottom card out. My plan began to take shape in the dead of night, in the silence of my small, cold room. It was a simple plan, elegant in its brutality. The house, the one they called ours, was legally mine, and mine alone. Frank and I had paid it off years ago, and my name was the only one on the deed. This single simple fact was the key to my liberation. My first step was to reconnect with the outside world. I started taking the bus to the public library, telling Tyler and Nancy I was going to a seniors book club. They were happy to be rid of me for a few hours. At the library, I used the computers to secretly access my full financial records. I printed out every bank statement, every credit card bill, every piece of evidence that documented their theft. I compiled a meticulous file, a damning testament to their greed. My next call was to my best friend Monica. I hadn't spoken to her in months, thanks to Nancy's campaign of isolation. I called her from a payphone, my heart pounding. "Monica," I whispered when she answered. "It's Margaret. I need your help." She didn't hesitate. "I knew it," she said, her voice a mixture of anger and relief. "I knew they were doing something to you. Where are you? What do you need?" I met her the next day at a quiet coffee shop across town. I laid out the whole story, the whole sordid, humiliating tale, ending with the dog in my bedroom. Monica's face was a mask of cold fury. "That ungrateful, monstrous child," she hissed, "and that venomous wife of his. Margaret, we are going to burn their little kingdom to the ground." Her fire fueled my own resolve. She put me in touch with a lawyer, a woman named Ms. Albright, who specialized in elder law and had a reputation for being a shark. My quiet, secret war was about to begin. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist, and my opening move was already in play. They had no idea that the quiet old woman in the den was assembling an arsenal that would blow their carefully constructed world apart. The execution of my plan required a level of patience and performance that I didn't know I possessed. I had to become the very person they believed me to be, a frail, forgetful, and defeated old woman. I played my part to perfection. I stopped questioning them. I shuffled through the house with my head down. I ate the meager meals I prepared for myself in silence. I became utterly, completely invisible. And they, in their arrogance, lapped it up. They saw my compliance as a victory, a final surrender. Their guard was down completely. Meanwhile, outside the walls of my prison, my army was mobilizing. Miss Albright, my lawyer, was a force of nature. "First," she said during our first secret meeting at her office, "we cut off the money. With a few signed documents, I opened a new bank account at a different bank, and we arranged for my pension to be redirected there. We then went to my old bank, and as the primary account holder, I removed both Tyler and Nancy's names from all my accounts, effectively freezing them out. We did it on a Thursday. I knew their mortgage payment for the SUV was due on Friday. The second step was the house. We are not going to evict them," Miss Albright had said, a predatory glint in her eye. "That's too slow and gives them time to fight. We are going to sell it right out from under them." The plan was audacious. We hired a real estate agent who specialized in discreet pocket listings, sales that are not publicly advertised. We would not put a sign in the yard. We would not have open houses. The agent would market the property directly to pre-approved cash buyers, explaining that the current tenants were unaware of the sale and that the transaction needed to be handled with extreme delicacy. The agent, a calm and professional man named Robert, thought it was the most interesting case of his career. He scheduled a handful of private viewings for times when he knew Tyler and Nancy would be at work. He gained access to the house under the brilliant guise of being a city appraiser, sent to reassess the property's value for tax purposes. Tyler and Nancy, blinded by their own self-importance, didn't question it for a second. They probably thought it was because of all their valuable improvements. I waited, my heart a constant nervous drum in my chest. Every day felt like a year. I continued my performance, shuffling around the house, saying nothing, watching as they lived their lives, completely oblivious to the fact that their kingdom was being dismantled, brick by brick. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Robert, the agent. "We have a full cash offer, Margaret," he said. "Well over asking price. They're a young family, they love the house, and they can close in 10 days. 10 days. The countdown had begun. The closing was a quiet, surreal event held at Miss Albright's office. I signed the papers, my hand surprisingly steady. The deed to my home, the repository of my entire life, was transferred to a new family. As the new owner's check was slid across the table, I felt a dizzying sense of power and liberation. I had done it. I had taken back everything. Now all that was left was the final, glorious act of a quiet, devastating war. The new owners, the Peterson family, were scheduled to arrive with their moving truck at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I had vacated the house 2 days prior, slipping out in the pre-dawn darkness with a single suitcase, and moving into a small furnished apartment Monica had helped me secure. Tyler and Nancy didn't even notice I was gone for a full day. The note I had left on my empty bed, which simply said, "I'm not needed here anymore," went undiscovered. That Saturday morning, I sat in my new sun-filled living room, a cup of tea in my hand, and I waited. I had blocked their numbers, but I had a feeling they would find a way to contact me. The call came at 9:17 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. It was Tyler, his voice a raw, ragged shriek of pure panic. "Mom, where are you? What is going on?" he yelled, the sound distorted by his fury. "There is a moving truck in the driveway. A family is here saying they bought the house. They have legal papers. What the hell did you do?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. "I sold the house, Tyler," I said, my voice as calm and quiet as a frozen lake. There was a moment of stunned, sputtering silence. You what? You can't. This is our house." "No, dear," I said, the endearment a tiny sharp icicle. "It was my house, and I decided I no longer wished to own it. The people on your doorstep are the new legal owners. I suggest you start packing." I could hear Nancy screaming in the background, a wild animalistic sound of pure disbelief. Tyler got back on the phone, his voice cracking. "You can't just throw us out. We have nowhere to go. We have rights." "Actually, you don't," I replied, and I could hear Miss Albright's voice in my head coaching me. "You were tenants without a lease, and as of yesterday's closing, you are trespassing on private property. The new owners are well within their rights to have the sheriff remove you. You are a vindictive, evil woman," he sobbed, his rage collapsing into pathetic self-pity. "No, Tyler," I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. "I am the queen you deposed, and you seem to have forgotten that the queen owned the castle. Goodbye." I hung up the phone. I did not feel a thrill of victory. I did not feel joy. I felt a profound, hollowing relief, like a fever had finally broken. I had done it. I had survived. The reports from the old neighborhood, relayed gleefully by Monica, were a portrait of public humiliation. I sit on my balcony now, watching the sun set over Cincinnati, the city that holds both my greatest sorrows and my greatest triumphs. My little dog Frank is asleep at my feet, his gentle snores a comforting rhythm in the quiet evening air. My life is small and beautiful, curated not by someone else's aesthetic, but by my own sense of peace. I often think about that moment, the one that changed everything, when Tyler looked at me and said, "You're not needed anymore." He meant it as the ultimate dismissal, the final word on my worth. He thought he was closing a door on me, locking me away in the dusty attic of his life. He didn't understand that he was, in fact, handing me the key. His words freed me. They severed the last fraying cord of maternal obligation that had kept me tethered to his cruelty. They gave me permission to stop trying, to stop hoping, to stop being the loving mother to a son who no longer existed. They gave me permission to save myself. I sometimes wonder what they are doing now, Tyler and Nancy, two ghosts of my past scattered by the storm they created. I do not wish them ill, but I do not wish them well either. I simply do not think of them at all. They are characters in a book I have finished reading and placed back on the shelf. My story is about the chapters that came after. It is a story about the quiet power of resilience, about the surprising strength one can find in the deepest wells of pain. It is about the realization that a home is not a collection of walls and furniture, but a place where you are seen, valued, and loved. And if that place is violated, you have every right to burn it down and build a new one, a smaller one, a quieter one, a truer one. I am not a queen. Tyler was right about that. I am just Margaret, a woman who survived, a woman who fought back, a woman who in the quiet twilight of her life finally learned that she was, and always had been, more than enough, and that I have discovered, is a kingdom far greater than any house,